Clara Miller was 19 years old and invisible. She lived in the spaces between the floorboards of Larkspur Ridge in the back room of Henley's Mercantile, where the air was thick with the smell of canvas, milled cotton, and the faint, sweet dust of dried apples. Her world was the size of the sewing table, her days measured by the rhythmic punch of the needle through heavy denim or delicate calico. The year was 1873, and Colorado was a place that rewarded the loud and the lucky. Clara was neither. She was small, quiet, and possessed a sweet-natured naivety that the townsfolk mistook for simpleness. She worked from sunup until the light failed, her fingers raw and needle-pricked, mending the clothes of ranchers, merchants, and the pious wives who ran the town's social circles. She was saving in a small tin box under her narrow cot at the boarding house. She kept her coins. She had $3.40, earned 1 penny and 2 pennies at a time. It was money for her family, stuck back east in debt, money she hoped would one day buy them a train ticket west. Mr. Henley, a man whose kindness was measured by the coin he saved, paid her just enough to keep her working. He praised her tiny, even stitches, but kept her hidden in the back, away from the main counter where the men gathered to talk politics and tobacco. Clara did not mind. The back room was safe. The bolts of cloth were her barricade against the rough sounds and sudden movements of the street outside. She was, the town agreed, a good, plain girl. That goodness was what they used against her. The rain began just after 5 o'clock in the evening, a cold, hard November downpour that turned the main street of Larkspur Ridge into a river of liquid mud. Clara was sweeping the thread clippings and fabric scraps from the wooden floor, her shoulders aching. She was tired. She was always tired. The bell on the Mercantile's front door jangled, a sharp, cheerful sound that cut through the drumming of the rain. Mr. Henley was counting out the day's receipts, his lips moving silently. He looked up, his expression shifting from annoyance to respect. It was Thomas Bishop, the preacher's nephew. Thomas was a young man who wore his piety like a shield. He smiled, but it never touched his pale eyes. Mr. Henley, a cold evening. Mr. Bishop, what can we do for you so late? Thomas looked past Henley, toward the curtain that separated the shop from the workroom. I'm here for Miss Miller. Actually, my aunt, Mrs. Bishop, has urgent need of her services. A tear in the elder's Sunday coat, and he means to wear it tomorrow. Clara stepped partly out from behind the curtain, wiping her hands on her apron. The Bishop estate was the largest house in town, set on a hill overlooking the canyon. She had never been inside. It's late, Thomas, Mr. Henley said, frowning, and the weather is foul. My aunt is aware, Thomas said smoothly. She insisted I offer payment for the trouble. 50 cents. Clara's breath caught. 50 cents. That was 2 full days of mending. It was a fortune. It would bring her savings to nearly $4. I can come, she said, her voice quiet. I just need my shawl. No need, Thomas said, holding the door. I have a buggy waiting. You won't get wet. Mr. Henley nodded, satisfied by the mention of the buggy and the price. Very well. Don't be late to the boarding house. Clara, Mrs. Gable keeps early hours. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. She followed Thomas Bishop out into the sheeting rain. There was no buggy. There was only the dark, churning street and the biting wind. My apologies, Thomas shouted over the storm. The horse lamed itself. It is not far to walk. Clara pulled her thin shawl tighter. She was already cold, the damp seeping into her worn boots. But she thought of the 50 cents and bent her head against the wind. The Bishop house was dark. It sat on the hill like a sleeping vulture, its windows black. The rain hammered the porch roof. Aunt Rachel is likely in the study, where the light is better, Thomas said. He pushed the heavy oak door open and gestured her inside. The entryway was vast and cold. It smelled of wax, old paper, and something else, something sharp and wrong. "Whiskey." Thomas shut the door behind her. The sound of the latch clicking loud in the sudden silence. The rain was muffled now, a distant, angry drumming. "Mr. Bishop?" Clara asked, her voice trembling slightly. "Where is your aunt?" A match flared in the adjoining parlor. A lamp was lit, casting a low, oily glow. Augustus Kane, the mayor's son, was lounging in a leather chair, a glass in his hand. He smiled at her, a slow, assessing smile that made her skin crawl. Standing by the cold fireplace, thumbs hooked in his gun belt, was Deputy Finch. He was a thick, brutish man who enforced the law with his fists. "Good evening, Miss Miller," Augustus drawled, his voice thick. Clara's heart hammered against her ribs. She backed away, her hand reaching for the doorknob. I am here for Mrs. Bishop. There has been a mistake." "No mistake," Thomas said. He stepped in front of the door, blocking her path. His pious expression was gone, replaced by something cold and eager. "We have a wager, Clara," Augustus said, standing up. He was tall, dressed in expensive Eastern clothes. "Thomas here believes you are as pure as new snow. Finch and we wagered that piety is just a costume for a price." "I don't understand," she whispered, though she was beginning to. The air was suffocating. "It is a moral test," Thomas said, his voice slick. "Larkspur Ridge is a godly town. We must root out weakness. We must see if you are truly virtuous, or if you are a temptation sent to weaken good men." "Please," Clara begged, looking at the deputy. "Mr. Finch, make them stop." Deputy Finch spat a stream of tobacco juice into the empty fireplace. "Test has to be fair, girl. Shut your mouth." Augustus Kane stepped forward, undoing the buttons on his cuffs. "We are prominent men, Clara, pillars of this community. It is our duty to ensure its moral fortitude." She tried to scream, but Thomas clamped a hand over her mouth. The last thing she saw before the lamp was extinguished was the glint of Deputy Finch's badge as he stepped away from the mantel, moving to block the parlor doorway. The rain lashed the windows, swallowing the sound of her struggle. She was left on the cold floor of the entryway, the heavy wool of her shawl soaked through with rain and tears. The house was silent again, save for the storm outside. A match flared. Augustus Kane lit the lamp, his face flushed and satisfied. He adjusted his waistcoat. "Well," he said, looking down at her, "I suppose I lose the wager. She is pure, or she was." Thomas Bishop looked pale, but his eyes were hard. "She failed the test. She showed weakness." A small leather pouch landed heavily on the floor by her head, skittering on the wooden planks. $10, Clara," Augustus said, his voice bored now. "For your silence. You were never here. If you speak of this, no one will believe you." "Who do you think they will trust? A seamstress with no family? Or the 3 men who run this town?" Deputy Finch opened the front door. The wind howled into the hall, lifting her skirt. "Get out, and be grateful we are letting you walk away." She crawled. She could not stand. She pulled herself onto the porch and fell down the steps, landing hard in the freezing mud. They closed the door, and the light in the entryway vanished. She lay in the mud for a long time, the rain washing the blood from her legs. $10. They had paid her $10. She did not go to the boarding house. She went to the marshal's office. Marshal Davies was an old man, tired and close to his pension. His office smelled of stale coffee and gun oil. He was reading a day-old newspaper when she stumbled in, dripping mud and shame onto his floor. She tried to tell him. The words came out broken, choked with sobs. She named them: Thomas Bishop, Augustus Kane, Deputy Finch. The marshal sighed. Rubbing the bridge of his nose, he did not look at her. He looked at the wall above her head. "Miss Miller," he said, his voice heavy with exhaustion, "those are Those are the most important men in this county. You are accusing the preacher's blood, the mayor's blood, and my own deputy." "It is the truth," she wept. "The truth," he said, "is a complicated thing. Are you certain you did not encourage them? Perhaps you went there seeking payment. $10 is a lot of money for a girl like you." Clara stared at him, the cold in her body turning to ice. They had already been here. They had already told their story. "No," she whispered. "You should go home, Miss Miller," the marshal said, turning back to his newspaper. "Dry off, and think long and hard about the trouble you are causing. This town does not like trouble, especially not from a wanton girl looking for easy money." Wanton, the word struck her like a slap. She left the office. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, but the cold was deeper now. It was in her bones. By noon the next day, the town knew, but they knew the story the marshal had heard. They knew the story the $10 told. Clara Miller, the quiet seamstress, had tried to extort money from the town's finest young men. She had gone to the Bishop estate willingly, late at night, and offered herself for coin. Mrs. Gibbons, who had praised her stitching only 2 days prior, saw her walking toward the mercantile and crossed the street, pulling her own young daughter close as if Clara carried a plague. At the boarding house, Mrs. Gable was waiting. Her arms were crossed, her face a mask of iron righteousness. "I run a clean house. Miss Miller, a decent house for decent folk. I need your room by sundown." "Mrs. Gable, please, I did nothing wrong. Your presence here wrongs us all. The preacher himself said so this morning. You are a source of temptation, a fallen woman. Pack your things." She went to the mercantile, desperate. She had to work. She had to earn money. Mr. Henley would listen. He was polishing the front counter when she entered. He did not look up. "Mr. Henley?" "Clara." His voice was flat. "I can't have you working here. It ain't decent. It's bad for business. My customers, they won't stand for it." "Where am I supposed to go?" she asked, the tears blurring her vision. "That is not my concern," he said, rubbing a cloth in hard, angry circles. "Your pay for the week is on the back table. Leave your key." She was fired. She was evicted. She was an outcast. She took her tin box of savings and the small bundle of her clothes. She walked out of Larkspur Ridge, past the church, past the saloon, past the staring eyes and the pointing fingers. No one spoke to her. She was a ghost. The only place left was the shack. It was an old prospector's lean-to, perched dangerously on the canyon's edge, a mile out of town. The wind whistled through the gaps in the plank walls. The floor was dirt. It smelled of rat droppings and dry rot. She lasted 6 days. The $10 Augustus Kane had thrown at her was useless. No one would sell her food. When she tried to buy flour from Mr. Henley, he told her to get out before he called the marshal. She burned the paper money for a few moments of warmth on the 3rd night. Her $3.40 in coin remained, cold and useless in her pocket. The cold was relentless. It settled into her lungs. A fever started on the 5th day, a hot, dry sickness that made the barren walls of the shack twist and swim. She shivered violently, wrapped in her one thin blanket, her teeth chattering until her jaw ached. She knew she would die here. They had not killed her in the bishop's entryway, but they were killing her now, slowly, with shame and starvation. On the morning of the 7th day, a desperate, final surge of strength moved her. She would not die in this hole. She would not give them the satisfaction. She tied her tin box into her shawl and stumbled out of the shack. She would leave Larkspur Ridge. She would walk until she found another town, or until she collapsed. She took the high game trail heading north, away from the main road. She did not want to be seen. The world was a blur of gray sky and brown, frozen earth. Her lungs burned. Every step was agony. The fever made her feel light, as if she were floating, but her boots were made of lead. The canyon yawned to her left, a vast, empty mouth. The world tipped, the gray sky and the brown earth swapped places and then went black. She fell not into snow, but into the cold, sharp scrub of the trailside, her face pressed into the dirt. She did not feel the cold. She felt nothing at all. He found her near dusk. Silas Holt had been checking his trap lines, finding only a frozen rabbit and a deep frustration. He was a man who moved like a shadow, his presence unsettling even to the landscape. He wore a long, worn duster, and his face was a map of old violence. A long, puckered scar ran from his left temple, across the bridge of his nose, and disappeared into his beard. He saw the patch of blue calico first, a stain of color against the dun-colored dirt. He nudged her with his boot. A girl, young. He crouched, his movements economical, and pressed 2 fingers against her neck, a pulse, faint and thready as a spider's silk. He sighed, the sound a plume of white in the freezing air. He looked at the sky. Another freeze was coming, a hard one. She would be dead by morning. He did not like towns. He did not like people. And he especially did not like complications. This girl was a complication. He was a wanted man. The rumor in Kansas, which had followed him here, was that he had killed a marshal. The rumor was true. He looked at her face, pale and streaked with mud. She looked like a broken bird. Silas Holt was a hard man, but he was not a cruel one. Leaving her was a cruelty he could not stomach. With a grunt, he scooped her up. She weighed nothing, a bundle of rags and bones. He settled her in front of him on his horse, wrapping her in his bedroll. He turned the horse not toward Larkspur Ridge, but away, up into the high, remote canyons where he lived. He was suspicious. No one came this far up the trail unless they were lost or running. But as he rode, feeling the faint, sick heat of her fever through his coat, he knew she was not a threat. She was just done. Clara awoke to warmth. That was the first thing her mind registered, a deep, penetrating warmth that she had not felt in weeks. It radiated against her back. The second was the smell, wood smoke, stew, and the faint metallic tang of gun oil. Her eyelids fluttered, heavy as wet canvas. They opened a crack. A fire, a small, neat hearth of river stone, blazing cheerfully. She was on a pallet of furs, covered by a heavy wool blanket. She turned her head. Her neck ached. Across the small, one-room cabin, a man sat in a simple wooden chair, cleaning a rifle. He was big, broad-shouldered, and the firelight threw his face into sharp relief. The scar, it was worse than she had imagined. A white, jagged line that pulled one side of his mouth into a permanent, grim line. He must have heard her move. The rhythmic clicking of the cleaning rod stopped. He looked up. His eyes were dark, shadowed by the brim of his hat, which he had not removed. They were steady, unreadable. He just watched her. Clara flinched, pulling the heavy blanket up to her chin. Her body screamed with terror. He was a stranger, a man, a large, scarred, dangerous-looking man. But the fire was warm. The stew smelled like life, and the blanket was dry. She stared at the outlaw, and he stared back. She was caught, trapped between the memory of a cold, dark entryway and the quiet, solid safety of a stranger's fire. For the first 3 days, Clara did not speak. She existed in a fog of fever and fear, bundled in furs on the pallet by the fire. The cabin was small, built of thick, rough-hewn logs, and impeccably clean. It smelled of pine, smoke, and salted meat. Her rescuer, the man with the scarred face, moved with a quiet economy. He never hurried, but he was never still. He tended the fire, checked his traps, cleaned his weapons. He brought her broth in a tin cup, hot and strong, tasting of rabbit and wild onion. He would set it on the floor near her head. "Eat," he would say. His voice was a low rasp, like dry stones rubbing together. She would wait until he turned his back, then drink it with trembling hands. When he moved suddenly, She flinched, her whole body recoiling, a sharp, broken gasp lodging in her throat. He saw it. He stopped making sudden movements. After that, he would scrape his chair or clear his throat before standing, giving her warning. He did not ask her name. He did not ask how she came to be half dead on the high trail. He did not ask her anything. This absence of questions was its own kind of mercy. It allowed her to breathe. The men in Larkspur Ridge had been full of questions and accusations. This silent, dangerous man simply offered broth and warmth. And for that, she was suspended between terror and a fragile, animal gratitude. When the fever broke on the 4th day, it left her weak as a newborn kitten, but her mind was clear. The fear remained, a cold stone in her gut, but the shame, which had been her only blanket in the shack, felt distant here. The mountains did not judge. She sat up, the heavy blanket pooling in her lap. Silas was at the table, oiling the leather of his saddlebags. He paused, watching her. "I must," she whispered, her voice cracking from disuse. "I must leave." He went back to his work, rubbing the oil in slow circles. "You would not make it a mile. The snow is deep in the passes." "I cannot stay. I have no money." "I ain't asked for money." "You saved me. I have nothing to pay you." He stopped his work and looked at her. His gaze was not unkind, but it was heavy. It pinned her in place. "I did not save you, girl. I just kept you from dying. There is a difference. Get your strength. Then you can go." She felt useless, a burden. She swung her legs off the pallet. The floor was cold stone. She stood, and the cabin tilted violently. She grabbed the wall to steady herself. "Sit down," he ordered. She shook her head, stubborn. I can work. I can mend. I am a seamstress." He almost smiled. The scar on his face pulled the expression into a grimace. "I do not have much call for seamstresses. My mending is done with sinew and an awl." She looked around the cabin, desperate to be useful, to earn the air she was breathing. "I can cook. I can clean." He nodded toward the small stack of pots by the fire. "The flour is in the sack. The beans are in the tin. We eat when the sun is high." That was how the new routine began. It was a silent partnership. She was weak, but she forced herself to move. She swept the stone floor. She boiled water. She learned to make a passable stew from the dried meat and beans he provided. She found his small sewing kit, the soldier's kit, and mended the tear in his canvas duster. Her stitches were tiny and perfect. He noticed, though he said nothing. He began to give her tasks, small things to pull her body back towards strength. "The kindling box is low," he said one morning, a week after her fever broke. She followed him outside. The air was so cold it stung her lungs, but it was clean. The sky was a sharp, piercing blue. The cabin was nestled in a high bowl of the canyon, surrounded by tall pines. It was invisible from any trail. He handed her a hatchet. "Not the axe. You will lose a foot. Make slivers, not logs." He showed her how, his large, scarred hands splitting the dry wood with frightening precision. She tried. The hatchet was heavy, awkward. Her arms ached, her palms blistered. But she did it. She filled the box. When she brought it inside, he nodded, a small, curt gesture of approval that made her feel warmer than the fire. He taught her other things, how to check the snares he set for rabbits, how to bank the fire at night so the embers would last until morning. One afternoon, he brought his horse, a tall bay gelding named Bo, into the small clearing. "You know how to ride?" A little, from my home, back east." "You will ride today." "Where are we going?" she asked, her voice tight with sudden panic. "Back to town?" "I am going nowhere. You are—" He cupped his hands for her boot. "You are weak. You will ride until your legs remember how to be strong." He put her on the horse. It felt like sitting on top of a mountain. He led the horse in a slow circle, his hand on the bridle. He said nothing, just walked. She held the saddle horn with both hands, her body stiff with fear. "Breathe, girl," he grunted. "You are holding your breath." She let it out in a shaky sigh. He walked, and she rode. He did this every day that the weather held. He would walk beside her, his presence a solid, silent wall. He never touched her, beyond the necessary help onto the horse, but she was intensely aware of him. She began to watch him, her fear slowly giving way to a cautious curiosity. He was a man of deep, ingrained habits. He was gentle with the horse, speaking to it in a low voice he never used with her. He would check its hooves every evening, his rough hands surprisingly careful. She noticed his limp. It was faint in his left leg, but on mornings when the cold was sharp enough to freeze the breath, he moved stiffly, favoring it. And she saw his hands. In the evenings, by the fire, he would carve. He took small blocks of pine or aspen and worked them with a knife. He carved birds, small animals. His hands, which were so steady with a rifle, trembled when he did this fine work. It was a slight tremor, one he tried to hide, but she saw it. They spoke, but never of the things that mattered. "Your leg," she ventured one night, her voice quiet. She was stirring a pot of stew, her back mostly to him. He was sharpening his knife. The sound of stone on steel filled the cabin. "The war," he said, his voice flat. "The war between the states?" "Aye, that one." "Were you—" "A soldier," he finished for her. "Union. A long time ago." He tested the blade on his thumb, then looked at the fire. "I learned a lot in that war, mostly. I learned that the man standing beside you is just as likely to shoot you as the one you are facing. Some betrayals cut deeper than lead." She sensed the deep, old wound in his words. It was a loss that went beyond the war, beyond the limp. It was something that had hardened him, scarred him on the inside, just as his face was scarred on the outside. She wanted to ask more, but the set of his jaw told her not to. The winter deepened. A heavy snow fell, blanketing the canyon in white, isolating them completely. The cabin became smaller, the silence thicker. They were trapped for 3 days, the wind howling outside like a hungry wolf. Silas grew restless. He paced the small room, from the door to the window, his limp more pronounced. On the second night of the storm, he pulled a dark bottle of whiskey from a crate under his cot. He uncorked it and looked at her. "You?" She shook her head. "Wise girl," he said, and took a long pull directly from the bottle. He did not get loud. He did not get mean. He got quiet. He sat in his chair, staring into the fire, the bottle resting on his knee. He drank steadily, his eyes growing distant. Clara sat on her pallet, mending one of her own socks. The only sounds were the crackle of the fire and the scream of the wind. "Her name was Elspeth," he said suddenly. Clara froze, her needle halfway through the wool. "She was not my wife. She was just... she was..." He took another drink. "We lived in a small valley in the hill country, before Kansas, before all this." He gestured at his face, at the cabin, at the world. "She knew herbs. She knew how to set a bone. She healed this leg when the army surgeon wanted to take it off." He slapped his left thigh. "She was good. Too good, I suppose." He looked into the fire, but he was seeing something else. The town folk, pious folk. They had a preacher, a man with cold eyes. He did not like her, did not like that folks came to her instead of him for healing. He said she worked with the devil. Clara's blood ran cold. She knew this story. She had lived a part of it. "They called her a witch," he whispered, the word full of venom. "A witch." He was silent for a long time. "I was gone, trading pelts in the next county. I told her I would be back in 2 weeks. The river flooded. I was gone 3. He upended the bottle and drank the last of it, then set it down hard on the floor. "When I got back, there was nothing, just ash. They burned her cabin. With her in it." He closed his eyes. His hands were clenched into white-knuckled fists, the tremor visible even from across the room. "I blame myself," he said, his voice thick. "I should have been there. I should have known. Pious folk, they are the most dangerous animals alive." He said nothing more. He slumped in his chair, the empty bottle at his feet, and fell into a drunk, troubled sleep. Clara sat and watched him. She looked at this scarred, broken man who was rumored to have killed a marshal, and she saw not an outlaw, but a man grieving. His pain was a mirror of her own. The townsfolk, the preacher, the accusations, the brutality hidden behind righteousness. They had both been ravaged by the same kind of evil. The storm broke the next morning. The world outside was painfully bright, covered in a thick blanket of new snow. Silas was outside, his face pale and drawn. He was working, splitting logs with a fierce, punishing rhythm, trying to sweat the whiskey and the memories out of his system. Clara bundled herself in a spare coat he had given her and stepped outside. The cold hit her face. He was struggling, his hands, shaking from the drink and the cold, fumbled with a heavy round of pine. He could not steady it on the block. He cursed, a low, vicious sound, and kicked the log. Clara walked toward him, her boots crunching in the snow. He heard her and tensed, his back to her. He was ashamed of the drink, of the confession. He expected her judgment. She stopped beside him. He stared at the chopping block, his breath coming in ragged, white plumes. His right hand, braced against the log, was trembling violently. She did not speak. She reached out, her small, needle-pricked hand covering his. She laid her hand flat over his scarred knuckles, pressing his hand firm against the wood. She held it there, steadying him. Silas stopped breathing. He looked down at her hand on his. It was so small, yet it had stopped his shaking. He could feel the warmth of her skin through his glove. He slowly raised his head and looked at her. Clara met his gaze. For the first time, she did not flinch. She did not look away. Her eyes were clear, and they held not pity, but a deep, quiet understanding. He swallowed. His breath caught in his chest. Neither of them moved. The world was utterly silent, just the snow, the pines, and this one, fragile touch. He slowly, carefully, pulled his hand from under hers. He picked up the axe, his hand steady now. He set the log, and with one clean stroke, split it in two. Things were different after that. The silence in the cabin was no longer heavy. It was comfortable. They worked together, a new, unspoken rhythm between them. She cooked. He hunted. She mended. He carved. She found herself responding to his quiet strength. He was a safe harbor. He had seen the worst of the world, just as she had, and he had survived. One evening, she was tending the stew. He stood to add a log to the fire. He moved behind her, and to steady himself, he placed his hand lightly on her shoulder as he passed. She did not flinch. She did not recoil. A jolt of warmth shot through her, sudden and sharp. It was not the brutal, cold touch of Augustus Cain. It was not the grasping, eager touch of Thomas Bishop. It was just touch, warm, solid, respectful. She leaned into it for a fraction of a second before he moved away. Later that night, she lay on her pallet, pretending to be asleep. She watched him by the fire. He was mending a harness strap, his scarred face softened by the low light, his brow furrowed in concentration. She watched his hands, the way they moved, the quiet capability in them. She thought of those hands holding hers in the snow, steadying her. A new feeling bloomed in her chest, a low, pulling warmth deep in her belly. It was something she thought had been burned out of her, something she had locked away in the cold entryway of the Bishop house. It was desire. It terrified her. It felt like a betrayal. How could she feel this? For any man, after what had been done to her, she felt a wave of self-loathing. She was ruined. She was wanton, just as they said. She turned her face to the cold log wall, her heart hammering. She was afraid of the men in Larkspur Ridge, but this new feeling, this slow, warm pull toward the scarred and silent man in the chair, this terrified her even more. It meant she was still alive. The snows began to thaw in late March. The world, which had been silent and white, began to drip. The high trails were still treacherous, choked with deep drifts, but the sharp teeth of the wind had softened, and the creek that ran past the cabin began to surge, its voice a low roar instead of a frozen whisper. They were low on flour, coffee, and salt. The jerky was holding, but the winter had been long. Silas stood at the open cabin door, smelling the air. It carried the scent of wet pine and thawing earth. "The pass is opening," he said. Clara stopped scrubbing the stew pot. A cold dread, familiar and sharp, settled in her stomach. "We need supplies." "Aye." He turned to look at her. His eyes were steady. "I cannot go. My face is known. Too many marshals in too many counties have paper on me. But you—" "I cannot go back there," she whispered, the words catching in her throat. "You are healed, Clara. You are strong. You are not the girl I found. They will know me. You will go at dawn. You will keep your head down. You will trade the pelts I've bundled for what we need. You will speak to no one but the clerk. You will be back before midday." It was not a request. It was a necessity. That night, she did not sleep. She lay on her pallet, listening to his steady breathing from his cot across the cabin, and she was swallowed by the memory of the cold, muddy street and the marshal's dismissive voice. She rose before the sun, her hands shaking. She could not wear her old dress. It was the dress of the victim, the dress of the wanton girl. She put on a pair of Silas's old denim trousers, worn soft and gray, holding them up with a piece of rope. She bound her chest flat with a strip of canvas. She tucked her hair, grown long and lank over the winter, under one of his old, stained hats. She put on his heavy canvas duster. The sleeves were too long, the shoulders too broad. When Silas woke and saw her, he stopped, the coffee pot halfway to the fire. She looked like a skinny, half-starved boy. He nodded, a flicker of something, approval, perhaps, in his dark eyes. "Good, that's good. Take Bo. He's faster than the mule." She packed the furs onto the gelding, her movements stiff. She mounted the horse, her body lost in the heavy coat. "Clara," he said, standing at her stirrup. She looked down at him. "Keep your head down," he repeated. "But do not let them see your fear. Fear draws dogs, and men are worse than dogs." She nodded, her throat too tight to speak. She turned the horse and rode down the game trail toward Larkspur Ridge. The town was louder than she remembered. The mud was thick, rutted by wagon wheels. The smell of the tannery and the brewery hung thick in the damp air. She kept her head low, the brim of the hat pulled down to shadow her face, and walked the horse toward Henley's mercantile. Her heart hammered so hard she thought it would break her ribs. She saw Mr. Henley sweeping the boardwalk, his back to her. She saw Marshal Davies talking to a freight driver. She slid off the horse, her legs trembling, and tied the reins to the hitching post. She walked into the store. It was warm, smelling of cinnamon, tobacco, and new cloth. It smelled of a life that was no longer hers. She went to the counter. A young man she did not recognize was working. A new clerk. Relief washed over her, so potent it almost made her dizzy. "Help you, son?" the clerk asked, not looking up from his ledger. "Got pelts," Clara said, her voice a low, rough imitation of a man's. "Need salt, flour, coffee, and cartridges. 30-30. Let's see the furs." She hauled the bundle onto the counter. The clerk inspected them. Impressed. "Good. Prime winter beaver. That will cover it. You want Arbuckle's coffee?" "It does not matter." As the clerk weighed out the beans, two women entered the store, shaking the mud from their skirts. Mrs. Gibbons and Mrs. Hart, the banker's wife. Clara turned her back to them, pretending to inspect a display of knives. "It is the talk of the town, Elspeth," Mrs. Gibbons said, her voice sharp. "Amelia's a lucky girl. To catch a man like Augustus Kane? Well, it is a blessing for them both." Clara's blood turned to ice. She gripped the edge of the counter, her knuckles white. "He is such a fine, upstanding man," Mrs. Hart replied, preening. "The mayor is overjoyed. He says Augustus is the future of this town. So responsible, so godly. The wedding is set for the 1st of June. They say the preacher himself is coming from Denver to officiate. A pillar of the community." Mrs. Gibbons agreed. "It is good he is settling down. A man of his station needs a good wife to keep him centered." Clara's breath stopped. Augustus Kane, the man who had smiled at her, his voice thick with whiskey, the man who had undone his cuffs, a pillar of the community. Getting married, praised, honored. The clerk shoved the heavy sacks toward her. "That is you, son. You need help carrying it?" Clara shook her head. She paid the small difference in coin from Silas's pouch, grabbed the sacks, and walked out of the store, her back straight, her steps heavy. She did not run. She loaded the horse, unhitched the reins, and walked him clear of the main street. Once she was past the church, past the edge of town. She mounted and kicked the horse into a desperate, punishing run. She did not slow until she was deep in the canyons, the sounds of the town long gone. When she returned to the cabin, Silas was waiting, his rifle resting in the crook of his arm. He saw her face. The trembling girl was gone. In her place was something cold and sharp. She unpacked the supplies in silence. She put the flour away. She started the coffee. She did not take off the duster or the hat. He sat by the fire, watching her. What happened? She stood by the hearth, staring into the flames. "They are praising him. They are calling him a pillar of the community. He is getting married." Silas closed his eyes. He knew, without her saying the name. "Did you ever want revenge, Silas?" she asked, her voice quiet, almost conversational. He stopped carving the piece of pine in his hands. He set the knife down. Wanting it is the easy part. It eats you, day and night. It's all you taste. It's all you breathe." He looked into the fire, seeing the past. "After Elspeth, after they burned her, I hunted them, the preacher and the two men who lit the torch. It took me a year. I found one of them, a farmer named Jebediah. He was in Kansas, with a wife and a new baby." "What did you do?" "I waited. I watched him. I saw him hold his child. I saw him kiss his wife, and I waited until he was alone, checking his fences." He picked up the knife again, his hand flexing on the handle. "I killed him. It was not clean. I wanted him to know why." The cabin was silent. "And?" Clara prompted, her voice tight. "And nothing," Silas said, his voice a low rasp. "It did not bring her back. It did not make the memory of the fire go away. It just put his face in my head, right next to hers. It put a price on my head. It made me this." He gestured to the cabin, to his isolation. "Vengeance leaves nothing behind but more loss. Clara, it is a hole you dig for your enemy, but you fall in too." She listened. She heard every word, and not one of them mattered. His logic could not touch the cold, burning thing in her belly. His warning was for a woman who had something left to lose. She had nothing. She turned to him. The firelight played over her face, still shadowed by the hat. "I am not like you, Silas," she said. She took off the hat, her hair tumbling down. She moved toward him, unbuttoning the heavy duster, letting it fall to the floor. She stood before him in the trousers and the tight canvas binding. "Clara," he said, his voice a warning. He stood up, wary. He saw the wildness in her eyes. the set of her jaw. This was not the girl he had comforted. This was someone else. "He is getting married," she whispered, stepping closer, until she was standing between his knees. "He is going to have a wife. He is going to be happy. And I am this." She put her hands on his shoulders. He flinched, surprised by her touch. "Clara, stop! This is the anger. This is not what you want." "It is the only thing I want," she said, her voice breaking. She leaned in and kissed him. It was not a gentle kiss. It was hard, desperate, full of teeth and rage. It was the kiss of a drowning woman. He grabbed her arms, his grip hard, and tried to push her away. "No, not like this." "Yes, like this," she pleaded, her face buried in his shirt. "Please, I need to feel. I need to take something back. They were the last. I cannot let them be the last. Please, Silas." She looked up at him, her eyes shining with unshed tears. But her gaze was fierce. She was begging him to help her erase the memory of Augustus Kane, Thomas Bishop, and Deputy Finch. He saw her desperation. He saw the profound, agonizing turmoil. He knew this was wrong. He knew it was grief, not desire. That drove her, but he also saw the truth in her plea. She needed to reclaim this one thing, to take her own body back from the ghosts that haunted it. He slowly relaxed his grip on her arms. He cupped her face, his scarred, calloused thumbs wiping the tears that had begun to fall. "This will not save you," he whispered. "I do not want to be saved," she whispered back. "I want to be whole." He kissed her then, gently, but she would not have it. She kissed him back with all the pain and fury that had been building for months. She pulled at his shirt, desperate to feel his skin, desperate to blot out the past with the present. He lifted her and carried her to his cot. It was not lovemaking. It was a storm. It was full of grief and longing, a desperate, fumbling clash of two broken people. It was angry and selfish and raw. It was everything she needed it to be. And when it was over, when the last shudder of adrenaline and release had faded, the full weight of what she had done, what had been done to her, crashed down. She turned her face into the rough blanket and began to weep. It was not a quiet crying. It was a deep, agonizing, body-racking storm of sobs that she had held back since that night in the entryway. She wept for her lost innocence, for her family, for the girl she had been, and for the cold woman she was becoming. Silas did not leave. He did not speak. He pulled the furs over her shaking body, lay down beside her on the narrow cot, and wrapped his arms around her. He held her, his solid, warm presence a silent anchor in her tempest, and let her cry until the tears were gone and there was only the sound of their breathing in the dark. The next morning, the cabin was still. The awkwardness was a heavy blanket. Clara could not meet his eyes. Silas got up, built the fire, and made coffee. He handed her a cup. "The cot is too small," he said, his voice practical. She looked at him, confused. "It is too small," he repeated. "For two." That afternoon, they built a bed. He used his axe to cut thick pine poles from the forest, and they lashed them together with rope and cured leather. They built a frame, wide and sturdy. In the corner of the cabin, they filled it with fresh, sweet-smelling pine boughs and covered it with all the furs from his cot and her pallet. That night, they slept in it together. He did not touch her, not in that way. He just lay beside her, a solid, warm line in the darkness. But in the cold hours before dawn, she found herself curled against his back, her hand resting on his chest, and she felt, for the first time in months, something close to safe. Their connection deepened. It was a quiet thing, built of shared tasks and silent understanding. The river, swollen with meltwater, became their bathing place. The first time, Clara was terrified, standing at the bank, unwilling to remove her clothes. He had gone in, the icy water shocking, and washed himself quickly. He turned his back to her. "It is needful, Clara. The cold washes more than dirt away. Slowly, she undressed. She felt his respect in the deliberate way he did not look. She stepped into the water, the cold so sharp it stole her breath. She washed, her hands shaking. "You're back," he said, his voice flat. He held out a rough cloth. She hesitated, then turned. He washed her back. His touch was practical, firm, and completely without judgment. It was just a man helping a woman. But for Clara, it was healing. It was a man's touch that did not demand, did not take, did not hurt. She stood still and let him do it, the shame of her past washing away into the rushing cold water. They lived as man and wife, though the words were never spoken. They shared the bed. They shared the work. They shared the silence. But the rage in Clara had not gone away. It had only been given room to breathe. One evening, as Silas cleaned his rifle, she spoke. "Teach me to shoot." He did not look up. The rag and rod moved in a steady, rhythmic motion. "No." "You taught me to chop wood. You taught me to ride. You taught me to set a snare. This is no different." "It is entirely different. I need to be able to protect myself," she insisted, her voice gaining strength. "If you are gone, if someone comes, I will not be helpless again." He stopped his work. He looked at her, his eyes hard. "You are not learning to protect. You are learning to kill." "And if I am?" she snapped back. "Is that not what you did? Is that not why you are alive?" He stared at her for a long moment. He saw the iron in her spine. He knew she would find a way, with him or without him. He would rather she know how to do it right. "All right," he said, his voice heavy with reluctance. "Tomorrow, at dawn." He started her with the rifle. It was too long, too heavy. It bruised her shoulder after one shot. He gave her his revolver. The Colt, it was heavy, but she could hold it with 2 hands. "This is not a toy," he said, his voice cold, all tenderness gone. "It is a tool. It has one purpose, to end a life. You do not point it at anything you do not intend to destroy. You breathe out. You squeeze. You do not jerk." He set up a row of tin cans on a fallen log 50 feet away. Her first shot kicked hard, stinging her hand and sending the bullet whining into the trees. "Again," he ordered. She shot again and again. She was single-minded. She ignored the ache in her arms, the ringing in her ears, the bruising on her hand. She loaded and reloaded, her movements becoming smoother, faster. She focused on the targets, her world shrinking to the front sight and the piece of tin. She practiced for days. She shot until her hands were raw. She practiced dry firing in the cabin at night, the click, click, click of the hammer the only sound. Silas watched, his expression growing darker. The girl he had saved was disappearing, replaced by a woman with cold eyes and a steady hand. She became good. She could hit the can 5 times out of 6. One afternoon, he had enough. She was reloading, her face set in a mask of concentration, ready to shoot again. "That is enough," he said. "I missed one," she replied, not looking at him. "I said, enough!" he roared, his voice cracking like a whip. He grabbed the gun from her. She rounded on him, her eyes flashing. "Give it back!" "This will not heal you! Clara!" he shouted, his face inches from hers. "You can shoot every can in this canyon. You can shoot those men. It will not fix what is broken in you. It will not make you whole." "I am already broken," she hissed, her voice trembling with fury. "But I will not be weak. I will not be a victim. I will not be that girl in the mud ever again." "You are trading one wound for another," he said, his voice dropping, pleading with her. "You kill them, and you become me, hunted, haunted. Is that what you want?" "I want justice," she said. "There is no justice, Clara. There is only what happens." He turned and walked back to the cabin. She stared after him, her hands clenched, her body vibrating with unspent rage. She refused to listen. He was wrong. He was weak. His vengeance had failed because he had stopped. She would not. That night, Silas slept, or pretended to. He lay still, his back to her. Clara sat by the dying fire, the cabin lit by the low, red glow of the embers. The silence was heavy, broken only by the wind outside. She reached for the small sewing kit where she kept her needles. From beneath them, she pulled a small, folded scrap of canvas, a piece she had cut from the supplies she bought at Henley's. She picked a blackened stick of charcoal from the edge of the hearth. She unfolded the cloth on her knee. The firelight flickered, slowly, with deliberate, steady strokes. She wrote on the fabric. First, she wrote, Augustus Kane. She stared at the name. Then, beneath it, she wrote, Thomas Bishop. And beneath that, Deputy Finch. She looked at the three names, black on the pale canvas. It was not a list. It was a promise. She folded the cloth, her face calm and set, and tucked it deep into her boot. The silence in the cabin grew thin and sharp. For 2 days after Clara had written the names on the canvas, she and Silas moved around each other like wary wolves. The air was charged with her unspent rage and his unspoken disapproval. He chopped wood with a grim, punishing precision. She practiced with the revolver, the clicks of the dry-firing hammer a sharp, metallic counterpoint to the thud of his axe. On the third morning, she rose before him. She did not put on the boy's clothes. She took out her old blue calico dress, the one she had worn into town that day, the one that still smelled of the mercantile. She took her sewing kit, the small soldier's kit Silas owned, and a sharp knife. She worked all day. She did not stop to eat. She cut the high, modest collar away, leaving the line of her throat and the top of her collarbones bare. She took in the waist, stitch by tiny, perfect stitch, until it fit her new, leaner body like a second skin. The girl who had hidden in the back room was gone. This dress was for a woman who intended to be seen. She washed her hair in the icy creek, scrubbing it with the harsh lye soap until her scalp tingled. She brushed it dry by the fire, letting it hang heavy and loose over her shoulders. When Silas came in from checking his snares, he stopped dead in the doorway. She stood before him, barefoot on the stone floor, her head high. She was no longer the broken, feverish girl he had found. She was not the boy in his duster. She was a woman, and she was terrifying. "I am going to town," she said. Her voice was calm. "Clara, do not do this." "I need supplies. We are low on lard." "That is not why you are going." "No," she said. "It is not." She pulled on her boots, the ones he had mended for her. She did not take his duster. She strapped the holster, the one he had taught her to use, over the blue dress. The contrast of the dark leather and the worn gun against the soft calico was jarring. She took her old, thin shawl and walked out the door. She did not look back. She rode Bo into Larkspur Ridge just after 3 o'clock in the afternoon. She did not hide. She did not pull a hat low over her eyes. She rode down the center of the main street, her back straight, her chin up. Men stopped. They stopped hauling barrels and stopped talking on the boardwalk. They saw a striking woman, her face pale and beautiful, her eyes cold as the high canyon snow. They did not recognize her. The gaunt, mud-streaked girl who had been run out of town months ago was a ghost. This woman was flesh and blood, and purpose. She knew Thomas Bishop's habits. She had mended his shirts. She knew he attended prayer meeting at the church every Wednesday afternoon, seeking to fortify his piety. It was Wednesday. She tied the horse not at the mercantile, but near the alleyway beside the church. She did not go inside. She waited in the mouth of the alley, hidden in the afternoon shadows, the smell of damp earth and refuse around her. The meeting let out just after 4. The small congregation filtered out, murmuring pious goodbyes. Clara waited. Finally, he emerged, his Bible clutched in his hand. Thomas Bishop. His face was pale and thin, his expression one of sharp, worried righteousness. He looked exactly the same. He turned toward the main street, and she stepped out of the shadow. "Mr. Bishop." He stopped, annoyed by the interruption. He saw a woman he did not know. "Ma'am?" She took one step closer, letting the watery sunlight hit her face. "It has been a long time, Thomas." His blood fled his face. He went white, his mouth dropping open. He recognized her. He stumbled back, his shoulder hitting the church wall. You are dead." "I am not," she said, her voice low and even. "No thanks to you. I do not know what you mean," he stammered, his eyes darting up and down the street. "You are Clara Miller. You are that wanton girl." "Am I?" she said. She smiled, but it was a cold, sharp expression that held no humor. "And what are you, Thomas? A pillar of the community?" He gripped his Bible so hard his knuckles cracked. "You must leave. If you are seen, you will be arrested for slander, for lies." "Lies?" she said, taking another step. He flinched, pressing himself against the brick. Was it a lie, Thomas, or was it a moral test? He whimpered, a small, pathetic sound. "It was Augustus. It was the deputy. I was testing your virtue." "And now Augustus Kane is testing his wedding vows," Clara said, her voice smooth as silk. "I hear he is engaged. Such wonderful news for a fine, upstanding man. I wonder what his bride would think of his tests. I wonder what your uncle, the preacher, would think, or his congregation, right here." She gestured to the church door. Panic seized him. He grabbed her arm, his fingers digging in. "What do you want? Money? Is that it? I knew you were after money." She looked down at his hand on her arm, then back up at his face. Her expression did not change. Slowly, deliberately, she moved her hand to the gun on her hip. Thomas recoiled as if she had burned him, snatching his hand back. "I do not want your money," she said. "I want you to know that I am not in the mud anymore. I want you to know that I remember everything. And I want you to know that I am going to tell them. I am going to tell everyone." You cannot," he breathed, shaking so hard his Bible fell to the boardwalk. "You would be ruined." "I am already ruined, Thomas," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "That is the gift you gave me. I have nothing left to lose. And you have everything." She turned, her skirt swirling, and walked away. She did not look back. She did not run. She walked to her horse, untied the reins, and rode out of town, feeling his terrified eyes on her back every step of the way. She was high when she got back to the cabin, high on the fear she had tasted in him, high on the power she had wielded. It was a potent, dark liquor. Silas was waiting at the table. He did not have to ask. He could see it on her face. "You saw him," he said. It was not a question. "I did," she said, pulling the pins from her hair, her hands shaking with leftover adrenaline. "He was afraid. Silas, you should have seen his face. He was terrified." "And so you have poked the hornet's nest," Silas said, his voice dangerously quiet. "I poked a coward. He will do nothing. He is not the only one." "Clara!" Silas roared, slamming his flat hand on the table. The tin cups jumped. "You think he is alone in this? He is running to Finch right now. He is running to Kane. And what do you think they will do? They will not shake. They will not whimper. They will shut you up." "I can protect myself," she shot back, her hand flying to the gun on her hip. "With that?" he scoffed. Standing up, he was towering over her now, his face dark with a rage she had never seen. "That is a toy, against men like them. Finch is a killer. He has been a killer for 10 years. You are a girl who has been shooting at cans for a week. You are a fool." "And what would you have me do?" she screamed, her control snapping. "Hide up here forever? Hide while they live and laugh and get married? While I am What am I, Silas? Your whore? The outlaw's pet? Is that all I am now? The word struck him harder than a fist. He reeled back, his face ashen. Do not say that. It is what I am. It is what they made me. It is what this is. This, he said, grabbing her, his fingers biting into her upper arms. This is what has kept you alive. This is what healed you. Or did you forget that? Did you forget the girl I carried up here? Half dead. I have not forgotten anything, she cried, struggling against his grip, beating her fists against his chest. I remember every second, and I will not live with it. I will not let them win. You are not winning. Clara, you are digging your own grave. Then let me. He shook her, his grip desperate, his face inches from hers. I will not let you throw yourself away. It is my life to throw away. The argument had reached its peak. There were no more words. There was only the raw, desperate energy thrumming between them. He was terrified of losing her to the same darkness that had consumed him. She was terrified of not acting. He did not let her go. His grip on her arms gentled, but did not release. He stared at her, his breathing ragged. She stared back, her eyes wide, tears of rage and fear streaming down her face. He kissed her. It was not a kiss of tenderness. It was a kiss of desperation, of anger, of yearning. It was a continuation of the fight. He kissed her to silence her, to hold her, to keep her from flying apart. She kissed him back with all the fury and panic in her heart, her hands tangling in his hair, pulling him closer. It was a clash of two wills, a desperate attempt to hold on to the one solid thing each of them had in this wilderness. He backed her against the wall, his body pressing hers, as if he could physically keep her soul from fleeing. It was angry and frantic. It was a demand and a plea, a raw, aching confirmation that they were, in this one violent moment, alive and together. He lifted her, and she wrapped her legs around his waist, her sobs mixing with his groans. He carried her to the wide bed of pine boughs and firs, and they fell together, their love making a desperate, angry, yearning storm. Afterward, the adrenaline faded, leaving only the cold, stark truth. She lay on her back, staring at the cabin's dark ceiling, the tears leaking from the corners of her eyes. He lay beside her, his chest heaving, his body slick with sweat. She broke, the high of her power in town, the rage of the argument, the desperation of their coupling. It all shattered, leaving the broken girl underneath. I am afraid, she whispered, her voice so small he almost did not hear it. He turned on his side, propping his head on his hand. He smoothed the damp hair back from her face. Afraid of them? No, she said, her voice catching on a sob. I am afraid of me. I am afraid that if I do not act, if I do not make them pay, that I will never be able. She closed her eyes. I will never be able to live with myself. The girl they left in the mud, the girl you found, she will be all I ever am. I will be dead. Silas, I will just be breathing. He looked at her, and the last of his anger faded, replaced by a deep, profound ache. He finally understood. This was not the simple, corrosive need for vengeance that had driven him. This was a fight for her own life, for her own soul. She was not trying to destroy them. She was trying to save herself. He lay back, staring at the same dark ceiling. The silence stretched. All right, he said, his voice heavy. She turned her head, her tear-filled eyes wide. What? All right, we do it. Your way. But not like this. He sat up, pulling the fur blanket around his waist. He looked down at her, his gaze intense. The soldier returning, not by running in blind, not by challenging them in the street. We will be smart. We will be cold. We will use their own town against them. He leaned close, his scarred face a mask of grim resolve. But you promise me you will not die in the process. You promise me you will listen. You promise you will not do this alone, or the deal is off."
"I promise,"
she whispered, her voice raw. "They are 3 men," Silas said, his voice practical now, the shift complete. "Kane is the money, Finch is the gun, and Bishop, he is the weak one, the pious one. He is the one we break first." They began to plan. Clara's knowledge of the town was their map. "Thomas buys whiskey," she said. "Tuesdays, at the back door of the saloon. He hides it. He is consumed by his own sin." "And his guilt," Silas added. "A man like that writes things down. A diary, a ledger." "I can write," Clara said, her eyes lighting with a cold fire. "I worked in the mercantile. I know Mr. Henley's hand. I know the preacher's hand. I know Thomas's. I can make it look like his."
"A forged confession,"
Silas breathed, a slow, grim smile touching his lips. "Good, that is good." "We send it to his uncle, the preacher, and a copy to the mayor. Let the pillars of the community tear each other down." Clara began to change. She still wore the blue dress, but she wore it now with a gun belt, a strange uniform of defiance. She walked with her head high, the shame burned out of her, replaced by a cold, sharp purpose. She was confronting her past by turning her femininity from a weakness into a weapon. They drafted the letter. Clara practiced Thomas's handwriting for a full day, her hand cramping, until she had it perfect. The jerky, cramped letters of a man terrified of his own shadow. The letter confessed everything: the moral test, the assault, the names, and the deep, unceasing guilt. "I have to deliver it," Clara said. "They have to be slipped under the doors, the preacher's house and the mayor's office. It has to be me. They are watching for you." Silas did not like it. "Finch will be watching. After you visited Thomas, he will be hunting. He is not a fool. I will be fast, in and out before dawn." "No," Silas said. "You will go in the afternoon, when the street is busy. You will be just another woman, but I will not be far. I will not let him trap you." She rode in 2 days later. The air was warmer, the town busy with freight wagons. She wore the blue dress and shawl, the 2 letters tucked in her bodice. She looked like any woman going to the post office. She slipped the first letter under the door of the mayor's office. Easy. The boardwalk was crowded. She walked toward the preacher's manse, at the edge of town near the church. The street was quieter here. She could feel eyes on her. She slid the letter under the door and turned to walk back to her horse. A hand clamped on her arm. "You have been busy, Miss Miller." It was Deputy Finch. He was not in his uniform. He was in a dusty coat, his face unshaven, his eyes flat and cold. He reeked of stale whiskey. "Oh, let go of me, Deputy!" "I do not think so," he sneered, his grip tightening, bruising her. "You have caused a lot of trouble for my friends. Thomas is a mess. Augustus is annoyed. We think you need to leave town permanently." He began to drag her toward the alley. "We are just going to take a walk." Clara twisted, reaching for her gun, but he was too strong. He backhanded her, the blow sending her staggering against the wall, her lips splitting. "None of that," he growled, pulling his own revolver. A shot cracked through the afternoon air. It did not hit Finch. It hit the wooden post 2 inches from his head, showering his face with splinters. "Let her go! Finch!" Silas's voice boomed from the roof of the tannery across the street. Finch cursed, shoving Clara to the ground. He dove behind a water trough, firing up at the roof. "I knew you were with that outlaw! You are dead! Halt!" Clara scrambled, pulling her own gun, but Finch was pinned by Silas's covering fire. "Get the horse! Clara, go!" Silas roared. A bullet from Finch's gun struck the shingles near Silas's head. Silas moved, running along the roofline to get a better angle. Finch saw his chance. He rose from behind the trough, ignoring Clara, and aimed his rifle at Silas, who was exposed against the sky. "No!" Clara screamed. Silas fired. Finch fired at the same instant. Finch grunted, his rifle arm exploding in a spray of red. He dropped the gun, screaming in pain, and staggered back, clutching his ruined shoulder. He looked at Clara with pure hatred, then turned and ran, disappearing down the street. Silas did not move. He was slumped against a chimney, his rifle sliding from his grasp. "Silas!" she screamed. She ran to her horse, mounted, and galloped down the alley, behind the tannery. She found the ladder he must have used and scrambled up. He was on his side, his face pale, his teeth gritted. "You are hit," she breathed, her hands flying to him. "It is just a scratch," he gasped, but she could see the dark stain spreading on his shirt, low on his right side, just under the ribs. "We have to get you back." It was a nightmare, getting him down the ladder, onto his own horse. He nearly passed out twice. She rode beside him, her hand on his back, pushing him, forcing him to stay upright as they fled into the canyons. By the time they reached the cabin, he was nearly unconscious, held on the horse only by her grip. She dragged him inside, onto the bed. Her hands, which had been so steady with the gun, were trembling violently now. She cut away the bloody shirt. The bullet had torn through muscle and flesh. It was deep, raw, and bleeding heavily.
"Oh, God,"
she whispered, her voice shaking.
"Silas."
She ran for the whiskey, the clean rags. She had to stop the bleeding. She had to clean it. She poured the whiskey straight into the wound. Silas roared, his body arching off the bed in pure agony. He grabbed her wrist, his grip like iron.
"I am sorry,"
she wept, her tears falling onto his chest.
"I am sorry. This is my fault. This is my vengeance."
He panted, the sweat beading on his forehead, his face gray with pain. His defenses were gone, shattered by the bullet and the fire in his side. He looked at her, his dark eyes somehow clear and focused through the haze of pain.
"Clara,"
he whispered, his voice a raw rasp.
"do not talk,"
she sobbed, trying to staunch the blood. "Save your strength." "No, I have to." His grip on her wrist tightened. If this is it, I have to say it." She looked at him, her eyes wide, her heart stopping.
"I love you, Clara,"
he forced out, the words thick with pain.
"I love you."
The word struck her dumb. She froze. Love. It was a word from another life, a word that belonged to the girl who had stitched dresses, a word that had no place in this world of blood and lists and cold revenge. She was full of rage and fear and a burning, terrible purpose. She could not say it back. It would be a lie. She looked at his face, scarred and pale, his eyes begging her. She could not say it. So she showed him. She leaned down, her tears falling on his cheeks. She kissed him. It was not the desperate kiss of their fight. It was not the grieving kiss of their first time. It was new. It was agonizingly tender. She kissed his lips, his scarred cheek, the line of his jaw. She kissed him with a gentleness that spoke of a thing she was too broken to name, a promise she was too terrified to make. She kissed him until his grip on her wrist loosened, and his eyes fluttered closed. It took 8 days for the fever to break. 8 days of Clara working with a grim, single-minded focus, the list in her boot a cold weight against her skin. She boiled rags. She forced broth and bitter willow bark tea between his lips, and she kept the wound clean. Silas was weak, lost in a haze of pain and delirium. He spoke of Kansas, of a fire, of a woman named Elspeth. Sometimes he spoke her name. Clara did not let herself think about the words he had spoken. "I love you." The phrase was a luxury, a thing from a life she no longer lived. It had no place here, in this cabin that smelled of blood and lye soap. Her tenderness, the fragile thing that had bloomed in her when she kissed him, was channeled into her nursing. It became fierce, efficient, and deeply protective. She would not let him die. She had promised he would not die in this. and she would keep her word. On the 9th day, he was awake. His eyes were clear, his skin cool. He looked at the clean, tight bandage on his side. He tried to sit up and winced. "You did good work, Clara," he rasped. "I had a good teacher," she said, handing him a tin cup of water. "Rest. We are not finished." "The town," he said, his voice urgent. "Finch, he will be hunting." "Finch is wounded," she said, her voice cold. "Your shot was clean. He will not be using that shoulder for a long time. And Thomas Bishop, the letters were delivered." A grim smile touched Silas's lips. "Then the nest is stirred." "It is," she said, staring into the cold ashes of the morning fire. "The forged letter will have set the mayor and the preacher at each other's throats, each suspecting the other. It will have broken Thomas. He is the weak link." "They will blame you for the letters," Silas said, easing himself up on one elbow. "I know, which is why I need a real confession. From Thomas, in his own hand, not a forgery." "Blackmail," Silas breathed. He nodded, the soldier in him assessing the strategy. "You threaten to release the forgery to the public, to the Denver papers, unless he gives you a real one, to be kept private." "I will meet him," Clara said. "Not alone. I am healed enough." "No." Her voice was iron. "You are not. And he is a coward, not a gunman. Finch was the gun. Thomas is the snake. If you are seen, it ruins the threat. He needs to believe I'm alone and desperate. This one is mine." He did not argue. He saw the steel in her, the woman who had held him together with stitches and willpower. She sent the message by a young boy from the livery, paid with 2 cents from Silas's pouch. The note was simple. "I have the original letter. Meet me tonight, 9 o'clock. The stables at your aunt's estate. Come alone. Burn this." That night, the sky was starless, the air thick with the smell of an approaching rain. Clara was not the woman who had ridden into town in the blue dress. She was dressed in Silas's dark trousers and duster, her hair tied back, the colt heavy and secure on her hip. She left Bo in a ravine a mile from the Bishop estate and approached on foot, moving like a shadow. The grand house was dark. The stables smelled of old hay and horses. She slipped inside, her hand on the butt of her gun, and waited in the darkness. He came, just as she knew he would. He was carrying a single lantern, his face pale and slick with sweat. He looked like a man who had not slept in days. He paced the straw-covered floor, jumping at every sound. "You came," Clara said, stepping out of an empty stall. Thomas screamed, a high, thin sound, and dropped the lantern. It sputtered in the straw. He scrambled to pick it up, his hands shaking so badly he could barely hold it. You are a ghost," he whimpered. "I am a consequence." "Thomas," she said, her voice low and even. She stayed in the shadows, just beyond the lantern's weak glow. "Your uncle received my letter. So did the mayor." "It is lies," he hissed, finding a brief flicker of courage. "They know it is. Forgeries. They will have you arrested." "It is a forgery," Clara said calmly. "But it holds the truth. And the truth is burning your little world down, is it not? I can see it on your face. They are fighting. They are terrified. Augustus Kane is wondering if his wedding will still happen. Your uncle is wondering if his congregation will stone him." "What do you want?" he begged, his bravado gone. "Money? I have money. I can get—" "I do not want your money." She stepped forward into the light. She pulled a folded piece of clean paper and a pencil from her duster pocket. "I want your confession, the real one, in your own hand." He stared at her, uncomprehending. "Why? So you can ruin me?" "So you can save yourself," she countered, her voice smooth. "A trade. You write down exactly what Augustus Kane and Deputy Finch did to me in your aunt's entryway. You sign it, I take that paper, and I disappear. I keep it as insurance. As long as I am safe, your secret is safe. But if anything ever happens to me, If I am arrested, if I am found shot in a ditch, my associates will send copies of this true confession to every newspaper from here to Kansas City. Your forgery will be the least of your problems." It was the perfect trap. His terror was a physical thing, a stink in the air.
I cannot. They would kill me.
Clara drew the revolver from her holster. She did not point it at him. She just held it. "They will kill you anyway. Thomas, men like Kane and Finch, they will silence you. You are the weak one. You are the one who will talk. You are a liability. Right now, I am the only one offering you a way to live." He looked at the gun, at her cold, calm face, and he broke. He collapsed onto a bale of hay, the lantern light illuminating his tears. "What? What do I write?" "The truth." She stood over him as he wrote, his hands shaking so violently the words were jagged and spidery. He wrote it all, the moral test, the names, the assault, the bribery. When he was done, he signed it with a flourish that was half sob. He held the paper out to her.
"Here, take it and go. Just go."
Clara took the confession. She folded it and tucked it deep inside her duster.
She had him.
Thomas looked up at her, his face a ruin of self-pity. He slid from the hay bale to his knees, his hands clasped. "Please," he whispered, "have mercy. I am a godly man. It was a mistake, a terrible sin. I repent it. I swear, I repent it every day of my life. Please forgive me." Clara looked down at the man groveling in the dirt and straw. She remembered his hand over her mouth, the cold, eager look in his eyes. She felt nothing. The burning rage she had expected was gone, replaced by a vast, cold emptiness. He was pathetic.
"Mercy is for God to decide,"
she said, her voice flat.
"I am just the woman you failed to destroy."
She turned and walked out of the stable, leaving him weeping in the dark. When she returned to the cabin, Silas was waiting by the door, his rifle across his lap. His side was bandaged tightly, his face pale, but he was standing. She handed him the paper. He read it by the light of the fire. "One remains," he said, his voice a low growl.
"Finch,"
she said. The name was hard in her mouth.
"He shot you.
He tried to kill me.
He is not Thomas. He will not fold. He will not bargain."
"No," Silas agreed, his hand resting on the stock of his rifle.
"Men like Finch only understand one thing. He is a hunter, so we hunt him.
He is in town, wounded, but protected by the badge."
"Then we draw him out," Silas said. "We draw him out of his territory and into ours. We use the one thing he hates more than me, you."
The plan was his. It was a soldier's plan. Cold, simple, and final.
"The shack," Clara said, the words tasting like ash.
"The old prospector's shack on the canyon rim,
where I stayed. It is where this began, and it is where it ends."
The message was delivered by the same boy, who was told to leave it on the deputy's desk at the marshal's office. It was not a letter. It was a piece of her old blue calico dress, the one Finch would have seen her wearing. On it, she had written 4 words in charcoal. "Clara Miller, the shack, midnight." "He will not come alone," Silas said, checking the action on his revolver. His movements were stiff, pained, but his hands were steady.
"He will come," Clara said. "His pride will not let him stay away. He has to finish what he started."
They rode to the canyon rim 2 hours before midnight. The shack was a rotting black square against the starlight, a tomb waiting for a body.
"You stay inside," Silas ordered, his voice all command. "Light the lantern. He needs to see a target. He needs to believe you are alone and stupid."
"I will be on the ridge."
"Opposite. He has to cross 50 yards of open ground to get to you."
"Silas, your side. You cannot—"
"I can," he said, his voice cutting off her protest. "I have fought with worse. Do as I say. Clara, this is my part."
She went inside. The shack smelled of damp. decay and her own old fear. Her hands shook as she lit the lantern and placed it on the broken table, its light a weak, flickering beacon. She was the bait. She backed into the deepest shadow, her revolver cold in her palm, and she waited. The silence of the canyon was absolute, broken only by the wind whistling through the gaps in the plank walls. An hour passed, then another. A boot scraped on rock. Clara's heart slammed against her ribs. A voice, rough and slurred with whiskey, cut through the night. "I know you are in there, you bitch! Come on out, or I will huff and I will puff and I will burn this place down around you." She held her breath. "I see you! Halt!" Finch roared, his voice echoing off the canyon walls. "I know you are up there on that ridge. You cannot protect her forever." A rifle shot cracked through the night, but it did not come from the ridge where Silas was. It came from the rocks to the left, from a second position. The lantern on the table exploded, showering the room in glass and plunging the shack into total darkness. "He is not alone," Clara screamed, scrambling toward the blown-out window. "Silas!" Another shot, this one from Silas's rifle on the ridge. Answering the first, the canyon erupted in a war of muzzle flashes. Clara saw him. Finch. He was using the second gunman as a distraction, moving fast along the canyon wall, his arm in a sling, but his good hand holding a revolver. He was trying to get behind Silas's position. "Silas, he is flanking you! To your left!" she screamed, firing her own revolver toward Finch's moving shadow. Finch roared in rage, firing back at the shack. The bullet splintered the wood where her head had been. Silas moved. He was not a static target. He dropped from the ridge, sliding down a 30-foot gravel slope in a cloud of dust, rolling, and coming up on one knee at the base of the canyon. He was between Finch and the second gunman. "You!" Silas yelled, and fired twice at the second man's position. A scream, and then silence from the rocks. Now it was just them, Silas and Finch, 30 yards apart, two shadows among the rocks. "Come on, lawman," Silas growled, his voice carrying in the still air. Finch fired wildly, his shot sparking off the boulders near Silas. Silas did not fire. He waited. Finch fired again, his panic growing. Click. Finch's gun was empty. Silas stood up. He walked calmly out from behind the boulder, his rifle leveled at his hip. He advanced on the deputy. Finch stared, his one good hand trembling. He was defenseless. His wounded shoulder slumped. He was beaten. Silas stopped 5 feet from him. He raised the rifle, aiming it squarely at Finch's chest. This was for Elspeth. This was for the marshals he had run from. This was for the wound in his side. This was for Clara. "Silas, no!" Clara ran from the shack, stumbling over the rocks. She put herself directly between Silas's rifle and the deputy. "Clara, move!" Silas commanded, his voice a low, shaking growl. The kill hunger was on him, his face a mask. "No." Her voice was steady, strong. She looked at Finch, who was slumped against the canyon wall, weeping in pain and terror. He was just a man, a pathetic, broken, evil man. "He deserves to die," Silas spat, his rifle unwavering. "Yes," Clara agreed, her eyes fixed on Finch. "He deserves it, but we do not deserve to be his executioners." She turned her head, looking at Silas, her eyes pleading. "You told me, Silas, you told me vengeance just puts their faces in your head. It will not heal us. It will just make us him. Look at him." Silas's gaze flickered to the whimpering deputy, then back to Clara. "Let him live with this," she said, her voice dropping, fierce. "Let him live with the shame. Let him live with his ruined arm, knowing he was beaten. Let him live knowing a wanton girl spared him when he had no mercy for her. That is a worse prison than any grave." Silas stared at her, his breath ragged.
He saw her, standing tall, her face streaked with powder smoke, her eyes clear. She was not a victim. She was not an avenger. She was free. Slowly, his finger relaxed on the trigger. He lowered the rifle. He looked at Finch with utter contempt. "Go," he growled. "Crawl back to whatever hole you came from. If I ever see your face in this territory again, I will finish this." Finch, clutching his ruined arm, scrambled away into the darkness, falling and rising, his sobs echoing as he fled. The canyon was silent again, the air thick with the smell of gunpowder. Clara reached into her boot. She pulled out the small, folded scrap of canvas. The list: Augustus Kane, Thomas Bishop, Deputy Finch. She walked to the shattered lantern, where a small flame still licked at the spilled oil. Silas watched her. She held the corner of the cloth to the fire. The canvas blackened, curled, and caught flame. The names, written in charcoal, blazed for a moment and then disappeared into ash. She watched the smoke rise into the dark sky. The cold, burning stone of rage that had lived in her belly for months was gone. In its place, there was a quiet, vast emptiness. It was something close to peace. Silas came and stood beside her. He put his good arm around her shoulders, and she leaned against his side. They did not go back to the cabin. There was nothing there for them. They collected the horses, rounded up the one left by Finch's man, and rode east, away from the canyons, as the first gray light of dawn broke over the mountains. As the sun rose, they crested the ridge. Clara looked down one last time at Larkspur Ridge, at the church steeple, at the mercantile, at the dark scar of the canyon rim where the shack stood. She was leaving it all. She left the shame, the whispers, the memory of the mud. She left the girl who had stitched calico in the back room. She turned her horse's head toward the open plains and did not look back. They rode for 2 days, putting the mountains behind them. They made camp by a small, rushing creek under a vast, open sky. The world felt new. Silas was tending the horses. His movement still pained, but his wound was closing. "You know, this does not change who I am," he said quietly, his back to her. Clara stopped stirring the pot of beans. "I know who you are. Silas." "I am still a hunted man," he said, turning to face her. "That price on my head in Kansas, it does not go away just because we left that town. There will always be marshals. There will always be bounty hunters. With me, you will never be safe." She looked at him, at his scarred, honest face. "Then we ride further," she said simply. A slow smile, a real one, spread across his face, pulling at the scar. "Aye, we ride further." That night they sat by the fire, sharing a blanket. The silence was easy, comfortable. "What you gave me," Clara said, her voice soft. "Back in that canyon, when you lowered the rifle, that was the last piece." He watched her, his expression tender in the firelight. "I came to you for protection," she said, staring into the flames. "Then I wanted revenge. I wanted you to teach me how to hate, how to kill. I thought that was the only way to be strong." "I know," he whispered. "But that is not what you gave me. You gave me something deeper." She turned to look at him, her eyes clear. "You gave me a choice. You let me choose mercy. When all I wanted was blood, you showed me a different kind of strength. You gave me back my own soul. Silas." His breath caught. He saw the truth in her eyes. The hardness was gone, replaced by a strength that was warm and alive. She reached up and touched his scarred cheek. Her fingers were steady. "You told me, in the cabin, when you were hurt." "I remember," he said, his voice rough. "I could not say it then," she whispered. "My heart was full of ash. There was not any room." "And now?" he asked, his hand covering hers. "Now," she said, a small, true smile touching her lips. "There is room." She leaned in and kissed him. It was a kiss that held no desperation, no anger, no grief. "I love you, Silas Holt. I mean it." He closed his eyes, a tremor running through him. He pulled her close, burying his face in her hair. "Clara," he breathed, the name a prayer. He kissed her again, and it was different from all the times before. It was not the frantic grief of their first encounter, nor the angry, yearning battle of their fight. It was slow, it was healing, it was a promise. He laid her back on the bedroll, under the vast, starry sky. They came together not as two broken people, but as two whole ones. It was a lovemaking of profound gentleness, of quiet, unburdened release. It was not about taking anything back. It was about building, for the first time, something new. 6 months later, they were Mr. and Mrs. Cole. The high canyon of Colorado was a memory, sharp and cold as the air had been. They had crossed the border, riding east and then north, into a wide, fertile basin that settlers were just beginning to call the Sweetwater Valley. It was a place of rolling grassland and a slow, meandering river, a place where the sky was vast and open, and the few neighbors were miles apart. They found a lapsed claim, a small, half-finished cabin abandoned by a prospector who had gotten gold fever and moved on. They finished it. Silas, with his soldier's knowledge of structure, set the logs. Clara, with her seamstress's eye for detail, chinked the gaps with mud and straw until it was airtight. It was not a hideout. It was a home. Life settled into a rhythm, marked by the sun and the seasons. The brutal, necessary quiet of the outlaw's cabin was replaced by the simple, domestic quiet of a homestead. Clara bought 6 chickens from a neighboring ranch, paying with a perfectly mended saddle blanket. She kept a small garden, and by late August, the front of the cabin was crowded with climbing bean vines and heavy, ripening squash. She was Mrs. Cole, a quiet, capable woman who was known to ride over and help with birthing calves or sick children. The wives of the valley, rough women with hard hands, respected her. She began to teach their daughters how to sew, how to turn a feed sack into a wearable dress. Silas was Mr. Cole, the scarred, quiet man who kept to himself but whose work was solid. He trapped beaver and muskrat in the Valley River, trading the prime pelts at the small post 20 miles south. He had a knack for mending things. He sharpened plow blades, reset wagon wheels, and fixed harnesses for the other homesteaders. They paid him in flour, coffee, and sometimes a piglet. In the evenings, he no longer cleaned his guns with grim purpose. He sat by the fire and read. He had traded a fine beaver pelt for a worn, leather-bound book of Shakespeare. His voice, that low, rough rasp, would smooth out as he read, sounding out the words of kings and poets in the flickering light, while Clara's needle flashed, mending his work trousers. Their life was simple. It was real. The past, however, was a patient hunter. It arrived on a hot Tuesday, just before noon. Clara was outside, wringing the neck of a chicken for their supper, her hands steady and practical. Silas was in the small lean-to he had built, hammering a red-hot piece of iron into a new hinge. Clara saw the rider first. He was not from the valley. He was not a farmer or a rancher. He was a man who lived in the saddle, his duster gray with trail dust, his hat pulled low. He wore 2 guns, low on his hips, their handles worn smooth. Clara's heart did not stop. It did not hammer. It gave one hard, cold beat, and then settled. She wiped her hands on her apron, dropped the hen by the chopping block, and waited. The rider stopped his horse 10 yards from the cabin, his eyes taking in everything. The small garden, the neat woodpile, the woman in the simple brown dress, her hair in a practical bun. "Ma'am," he said, his voice like gravel. "Sir," Clara replied, her voice polite, calm. You look like you have come a long way. Can I offer you a drink from the well? It is cold. Obliged. He swung down from his horse. He did not move like a visitor. He moved like a man assessing a threat. He kept his hands near his belt. Clara went to the well, drew a bucket, and poured a dipper of water. She held it out to him. Her hand was perfectly steady. He drank, his eyes never leaving her. He handed the dipper back. My name is Flagg. I am a traveler, looking for a man. This is a lonely valley for travelers. Clara said simply, We do not see many strangers. This one stands out, Flagg said, wiping his mouth on his sleeve. A man named Holt, Silas Holt, rumored to be from Kansas, last seen in Colorado. Killed a marshal. He has a price on his head worth $500. Clara did not blink. She picked up a basket of beans from the porch step and began to shell them, her thumbs moving in a steady, practiced rhythm. Holt, I do not know that name. Sir, my husband and I, we are the Coles. We have been here since the spring. Our neighbors are the Abernathys and the Millers. No one named Holt. Flagg's gaze sharpened. He has a scar, a bad one, runs from his temple, down his face. You see a man like that? You do not forget him. Clara paused her work. She looked up at the hard, distant mountains, as if in thought. A scarred man, she said, her voice thoughtful. Yes, I believe I do recall a man like that. The bounty hunter tensed. You did? He passed through, Clara said, her gaze returning to his, her expression open and helpful. Oh, it must have been 3, maybe 4 weeks ago. He bought some eggs. Said he was heading north, up toward the Wyoming territories. Said the settling was getting too thick for him here. He was a rough-looking man. That is certain. Looked like he had been riding hard. She had given him a plausible story, a cold trail, and a direction. The lie was as smooth and clean as a new forged blade. Flagg stared at her, weighing her words. She seemed simple, a homesteader's wife. He looked past her, into the open cabin. He saw a clean-swept floor, a table set for 2, a stack of mended shirts. It did not look like the den of a wanted killer. Just you and your husband here? He pushed. One last time. Just us, Clara said, smiling faintly. Mr. Cole is in the shed, working. He mends tools for the folks around here. He's not much for company, but he is a good man. Works hard. She was projecting a life. Simple, boring, and, above all, harmless. Flagg was disappointed. The rumor that had brought him to this valley was clearly just that. This was a dead end. Ma'am, he said, tipping his hat. He turned, mounted his horse, and pulled the reins, turning the animal north. Sir, Clara said, her voice stopping him. He looked back. It is a hard country up there in the territories, she said, her voice still polite, still sweet. My husband taught me to be watchful, taught me to shoot. I am quite good with that rifle just inside the door. She nodded toward the cabin. I can hit a hawk on the wing at 100 yards. You ride safe now. It was not a threat. It was a statement of fact, delivered with a housewife's charm. The bounty hunter looked at her, truly looked at her. He saw the cold steadiness in her eyes. He saw the woman who had not flinched. He nodded once, a gesture of grudging respect, and kicked his horse into a trot, heading north, just as she had directed. Clara did not move. She did not breathe. She stood and watched until he was a small, black speck on the vast, green plain. Only then did she sit down on the porch step, the basket of beans in her lap. Her hands began to shake, a violent, rattling tremor that shook her whole body. The hammering from the lean-to had stopped. Silas came around the side of the cabin, the heavy blacksmith's hammer still in his hand. He had listened to the entire exchange, standing just inside the shed, ready to move, ready to kill.
He watched her shaking, saw the sweat on her upper lip, the pale color of her skin. She had stood between him and the man who hunted him, and she had turned him away with nothing but words and iron will. He walked to her and sat on the step beside her. He said nothing. He simply reached out and took her trembling hand, his own scarred, calloused one covering hers, holding it steady until the shaking finally stopped. He looked at her, his dark eyes full of a new, profound understanding. This was not the broken girl he had carried up a canyon wall. This was not the feverish, terrified creature he had nursed. This was not even the cold, rage-filled woman he had trained to shoot. This was Clara, whole, strong, and in her own quiet way, far more dangerous than he had ever been. He had spent his life running, hiding, and fighting. Clara had just faced the danger head-on and made it blink. He realized, with a surge of awe and love, that she was no longer the one who needed saving. In that moment, she had saved him. The visit left a shadow. The peace of the valley felt thin. The danger was real. A few days later, Silas said, "Let us go to the river. It is too hot to work." They walked down to the slow, wide water, a place shaded by tall cottonwoods. It was not the icy, rushing creek of their first practical bath, nor the cold, sharp water of their healing. This was a warm, late summer river, its surface lazy and green. They undressed, their movements easy, familiar. They had been man and wife for months. They waded into the water, and the quiet intimacy of it washed away the tension of the bounty hunter's visit. They sat on the bank afterward, sharing a blanket, the sun dappling through the leaves. "I used to hate my body," Clara said quietly, staring at the water. After Larkspur, it was a thing they had broken, a thing I had to live inside. I hated it. I was ashamed of it. Silas listened, his hand resting on her back. "When I was with you," she continued, her voice a whisper, "back in the cabin, after that first night, I was so afraid, not of you. I was afraid of wanting. I never believed I could feel that again. I thought that part of me was dead, buried in the mud with that girl." She turned to look at him, her eyes clear and dark. "I thought I would never be able to want again, not love, not touch, not anything, but with you, Silas, I wanted everything." The admission hung in the warm air. The truest thing she had ever said. It was the final stone laid in the foundation of her healing. He felt the words like a physical blow, a release of all the pain he had carried for her. But the bounty hunter's shadow remained. "Clara," he said, his voice rough, "he found us. Or he came close. Others will, too, as long as I am who I am. That price on my head is real. I am danger to you." He looked at their small, peaceful life. "You have a life here. You are Mrs. Cole. You are respected. The women here, they look up to you. You are teaching their children." He took a deep breath, the words tasting like poison. "I can go north. I can follow the trail you laid for that hunter. I can draw them away. You can be free of this. You deserve to be free of me." She listened to his offer, this terrible, selfless sacrifice. The girl he had saved might have taken it. The avenger might have let him go. But Clara looked at him, her gaze unwavering. She did not get angry. She did not weep. She simply leaned forward and pressed her hand against his scarred cheek. "Free of you?" she said, as if the words made no sense. "Silas, look at me." He met her eyes. "You are not danger. You are my life. You are the man who showed me what strength was. You are the man who taught me to be strong. You are the man I love. We are not running. We are living. This is our home. And if we have to ride further, then we ride further. But we ride together." She had made her choice. She had not chosen safety. She had chosen him. He pulled her to him, his arms wrapping around her, and he held her as if she were the only anchor in the world. A week later, the rhythm of their life was fully restored. The bond between them forged now not in shared trauma, but in a shared, chosen future. Clara was alone in the cabin. Silas was out checking a trap line for a beaver he had been tracking. The cabin was quiet, filled with the late afternoon sun and the smell of baking bread. She pulled out the small leather-bound ledger where she kept the household accounts. 6 cents for thread, 12 cents for sugar, $2 for trap repairs. She turned to the last empty page. She picked up the small pencil she used for her figures. She was not writing to anyone. She was not writing for the future. She was closing a door. She wrote, "My name is Clara Miller. They tried to bury me. They took my job, my home, and my good name. They thought they had taken everything. They thought they had left me with nothing but shame." She paused, her gaze drifting to the rifle resting by the door, the one she had told the bounty hunter about. She looked at her hands, no longer raw from mending, but strong and capable. They were wrong. She pressed the pencil to the paper, her handwriting firm and clear. They took everything, but I took it back, on my own terms. She closed the book and slid it back onto the shelf. It was done. When Silas returned, the sun was low, painting the valley in shades of gold and purple. The bread was cool. "We are low on salt," she said, wrapping the loaf in a cloth. "Then we ride," he said, a smile in his voice. They rode toward the trading post, their 2 horses moving slowly, side by side. This ride was not a flight from terror. It was not a grim journey of disguise. It was not a hunt. It was a simple, domestic errand. As they passed the Abernathy Ranch, the farmer was in his field. He looked up and waved. "Evening, Mrs. Cole. Mr. Cole." Silas nodded. Clara, her seat steady in the saddle, reached over and took her husband's scarred hand. He laced his fingers with hers. She waved back at the farmer, and she smiled. It was a real, warm, genuine smile. She was no longer afraid of being seen. Thank you for listening to this story. We would love to know where you are listening from, so please drop a comment. If you enjoyed this, be sure to subscribe to From Wild West for more stories just like this. We look forward to reading your thoughts, so please share them with us in English.